Good morning to you all, and welcome to this launch of National Career Development Week. Now, our final speaker this morning is Sam Sheppard. Sam is the Director of Build More Building Solutions. She spearheaded Women into Building projects, and this is a project that is based on the Sunshine Coast. It's an initiative that saw Australia's first small lot sustainable home designed and constructed and supplied primarily by women. The multi-award-winning project subsequently went on to receive international attention through successfully encouraging thousands of women right across Australia to consider themselves as role models to other aspiring young women. Sam has promoted gender diversity in the workplace. Would you please welcome Sam Sheppard.
So I actually got my first jobs when I was 11. I had 3 jobs at the age of 11. I grew up with 2 older brothers who frequented the boys' homes. So I was the only one that was legitimately legal, and I was also the smartest of the 3 of us, being the youngest. And my parents sent me to a private school. So I think I did have a little bit of a different start out to my brothers. And then they ended up in technical school, and my parents desperately wanted me to go to a college. But I knew how hard my dad was working and I just refused. I ended up going to high school. But at 11 years old, I had a job at the Sunday market each Sunday morning. So I would get up at 4:30 and be there at 5. And I had a job with my brothers when they'd go and do the paper run. I went with them one day to the newsagent and talked them into giving me a job while my brothers were on the paper run, just tidying up all of their cards and setting up the newspapers and so forth in the morning. And then I also had my own little Avon business, and I loved it when I'd knock on someone's door and the kids would answer it and say, "Mum, the Avon lady's here." And I just loved being 11 and being called a lady, and handing out the little lipsticks and things like that. So I was quite mature for my age. I was the oldest of us kids to move out of home because we did have a dysfunctional family, and I was 15 when I moved out of home. So I was, at that time, I'd started an apprenticeship as a hairdresser, and I found myself living in a house full of teenagers surrounded by drugs. So I was dead against the drugs, and I think after 9 months or so of fighting it and arguing with people and seeing syringes and just going off my nut and having arguments over would you rather they be safe and not be catching things from each other, and I'm just like I'd rather just not see them at all. But I actually started to get curious. So some of the points that I want to make to you today cover the 3 C's, and I'd really like you to try and remember them. And the 3 C's that I sort of want to weave through my story is character, your strength of character, choices, the choices that you make, and courage is the other one. So at this point when I was 16, at this stage, I decided I'm either going to end up doing this, which is not a path I want to go down, or I actually need to remove myself completely, because if I continue to associate with these people, I'm going to go down that path. So I grew up in the eastern suburbs of Melbourne, and I actually moved to Queensland. I looked at a map, saw what looked like a nice little spot on the waterfront, and headed up there at 16. I knew no one. I left my entire family, I left everyone I knew and moved to this distant place 2,000 kilometres away, 2 states apart, and knew no one. So I had to hock all my silver jewellery and my leather jacket to pay for my first place, which I couldn't afford, and ended up moving in with another lady and slept on her lounge. She had 3 kids and I lived on her lounge for a while. So I actually met my boyfriend, who I later married, and of course I was 16, he was 25 and had been married and had a son. So I was very mature for 16, but when I was 17, we actually started up a cabinet making business. Beep. So this was me at 17. We set up the cabinet making business from scratch. We'd been up up north, and I'd worked in a timber yard, and he was on the prototype condominiums at the Mirage Resort. So he was actually paying in tax what I was earning. But when we came back, he had a big tax bill from previously of $7,000, and we'd saved $7,000, and we went to the bank back when you would actually sit in front of the bank manager and said, look, if we spend our $7,000 setting up our cabinet making business and we can't make it back by the time this tax bill falls due, would you lend it to us? And he said yes. So that's what we did. We went out and bought compressors and things like that. So it was no different for me working with fellas, working with men. If I ever had a confrontation with one of the guys or anything like that, I just kind of put it down to the fact that I was younger. That I was young and starting out. I never got a chip on my shoulder that it might be because I'm female, because that just didn't come into the equation. I'd always been around boys. So it was only years later when I'd had the cabinet making business, I'd renovated houses and so forth. My first house was also purchased at the age of 17 on a $1,000 deposit. Beep. Isn't that beautiful? $25,000. The real estate agents were really upset with us actually, because they used to take buyers for a drive to see what they could sell them, and they'd drive them past this one and say, if you've only got $50,000, this is all you could buy, but if you want to spend 30 more, and of course they couldn't take them past that one anymore. Beep. So this is what we took it back to. Beep. And we lived, beep. We lived in the laundry out the back, so we actually did the laundry up first. It was very exciting because we lived in a caravan prior to that, so living in a 3-metre square room was no different. It was actually just really exciting because we were in our own place. So this was our lounge folded down to a bed. This was a bench top where we cooked on, as well as our sink, as well as the laundry tub and all that sort of thing. Beep. And we had an old outhouse as well, and the outhouse had a porta potty in it. That was our toilet because we didn't have plumbing yet, and our shower consisted of a camping shower bag, so we had to boil the kettle in the morning and put the hot water into the bag and stand over the porta potty and have a shower that way. But I loved it, and it was fantastic. Beep. There's a before and after shot of our kitchen, so that's what we walked into. 1920 newspapers on the floor, and you know, in 1987, 88, that was sort of the in vogue. It looks a bit countrified now. I'm a bit more cosmopolitan in taste these days. So that was my first house, and that's where I really developed my love for the building industry and how creative it can be, and just how for every dollar you spend, you make two when you do it right. Beep. So a little later on, when I'd renovated house after house after house, I met Pete, and I met him on a job site, and he decided to make an honest woman of me, and we started up the Build More group so that we could actually be building houses for other people rather than just renovating for ourselves. So our original branding was much like this, and we just found that we were drawing people to us because our branding said, we will build you cheap house. So we were getting a lot of people coming to us who were half-owner builder, who were first home buyers, and just wanted us to get them to lock up. And seriously, we could have sat on the beach and made more money. So we ended up deciding, look, we really love what we do, we're passionate about it, and we rebranded, and all of our colours that went with it. And literally from that day forward, the entire clientele that came to us was far more upmarket, and the phones just stopped ringing from the first home buyer. So that definitely worked. But it was only when I was a licensed builder, by the time I had secured my licence and done the additional training, that people started to say to me, wow, you've got an inspirational story, you should share it. And I started going to schools and talking at career days at schools and so forth. And people were saying, well, that's just such a great story, such a great role model. And I was like, I never thought I was any different. I never thought of myself as being different. But it was around this time that I sort of said to people, maybe from a marketing perspective, what if we put us out there as me being a female builder? How would that make you feel? Like if that was successful and I got all the attention and you were in the background as my counterpart, would you feel jealous? Would you feel resentful? Would it cause problems with us? And he said, no, babe, look, if that makes us stand out in a crowd and if that takes off successfully, good for you, I'm right beside you all the way. So that's what we did. Beep and beep. And throughout our building and so forth, if you just want to go through the next few at your own rate, there's just some of the later style houses that we do. So I actually did a project in Pomona, and it was a cabin project, and we had apprentices, and we got about 50 apprentice girls together, and that was just such an inspirational project to work on, because you really got to see these girls mingle with each other. And we discovered that for many of them, because girls or ladies are such a minority in the building trade, that many of them don't cross paths with anyone else. So they think they're isolated, they think they're a loner, they think they're a trailblazer. So within the portions of the industry that are, that's my car, the portions of the industry that are desk related, such as certification, engineering, architecture, town planning, projects like that or jobs like that, there's about 14% women. Whereas when you think in terms of the trades that work on site, it's down at around 2%. So they are a minority, but it's such an outstanding job. I love what I do, and the women that I do come across, because I mingle and I'm involved with the industry associations and so forth, they all love what they do. So someone actually rang me and said, how would you like to build a house? Predominantly by women, and I approached my partner and said, it'll turn our lives upside down, but would you like to do it? And he was like, ooh, it's such a big risk. Beep. And we decided that we'd take on this project, and we secured a block of land, and then we organised an appointment with, or a committee meeting with a few of the associations that we'd worked with, and got them on board. So we had like the Office for Women, and we had Master Builders, which is an industry association, the National Association of Women in Construction, and a few like that. That gave our project the credibility to take it forward, and it was just such an amazing experience to have all of these women who, for many of them, felt that this was the opportunity of a lifetime, because they never come across other ladies out on site. They figured to be able to work alongside of other women, that every day when you turn up, there's 6 or 8 other women on site. So the feeling on site, the culture and the attitude of everyone was just inspiring. But a lot of that takes courage. And when you think like a baby, when a baby starts walking, it takes courage to take that first step. It takes courage to go for your first day to a new school. It takes courage to approach someone for the first time and introduce yourself, to make a new friend. And it took courage for me to move interstate at 16 and not know a soul. There's so many things that take courage in life. And again, coming down to choices. Each and every choice that you make, it doesn't matter what your schooling is. I left school at 15. I don't advocate that, but there's kids that do. My oldest son was not academic. He is dyslexic. But we pulled him out and we put him into a carpentry apprenticeship. So he's 19 and he's a fully qualified carpenter. So there's academic people who also love the industry. But if you make enough of the right choices, you will get where you want to go. And that comes down to what you put, when you set your alarm and your alarm goes off in the morning, do you get up or do you press the snooze button? When your friends want to go out and spray paint walls, do you go with them? Or do you say, I'll give this a miss? When you've got a friend who's had a few drinks, when you're older, would you get in the car and let them have your life in their hands? Or would you speak up?